everybody. Good afternoon, good morning from unusually warm and sunny London. Welcome to Elevate. Welcome to the summit. We are going to shortly hear the keynote from Nancy. Just a quick introduction of Nancy. Nancy Wang is a general manager at Amazon Web Services, where she leads P&L, product engineering and design for its data protection and governance businesses. Prior to Amazon, she led SaaS product development at Rubrik, the fastest growing enterprise software unicorn, and built healthdata.gov for the US Department of Health and Human Services. She's passionate about advancing more women into technical roles, and Nancy is the founder and CEO of Advancing Women in Tech, a global 501c3 nonprofit with 16,000 plus members spanning 3 continents. Nancy is also an angel investor in data security and compliance companies and an LP with several seed and growth stage funds, such as Operator Collective and IVP. She's earned a degree in computer science from the University of Pennsylvania. Nancy with her keynote. Welcome, Nancy.
Thanks so much, Deepak, and thank you everybody for tuning in today. The topic that I wanted to share with you all today, and we'll have some time towards the end as well for a Q&A, is one that's actually come up quite frequently. And specifically in my process of building data protection products, as well as running a nonprofit for that includes a lot of tech leaders, both on the product side as well as engineering side. Building privacy-centric products has come up more than a handful of times in recent conversations. And so the question becomes for a lot of us, right, is as product managers, how should we think about privacy, and how do we incorporate privacy fundamentals into the products that we're building, right? And so this brings me to kind of the first question of today, which is, why is privacy, really so important? And I think to start off, right, we have to admit that it's really here to stay. There's so many different factors at play, including, I'm sure as you've heard multiple times by now, right, regulations like GDPR, CCPA, that are driving privacy to be a step that's included a lot earlier in the product development process, right? So if you think about traditional product development engineering, you come up with the product requirements, you build APIs for your product, and then it goes into some black box, right, with application security teams or SecOps teams that then provide approval for your product. Well, actually now, right, part of that responsibility has actually shifted into the hands of product managers who build any types of products that will touch or collect customer data. So that's why this is important, and I want to be able to share that with you all today. Right, so if we look at big companies like Google and Apple, they're stepping up to treat privacy in a major way, right, and making privacy really a core part of their current platform. So for example, if you look on Apple apps in the IoT store today, you'll see a privacy nutrition facts label, right? And it's really Apple's way of providing consumers a way to see how iOS apps actually end up using their personal data. And what that means is it all culminates into consumers being super aware for the first time of how their data is being used, right? Being gathered, collected in all of these various applications. Because up until now, right, I personally, as a product manager, when I first started at Google and other places, right, it was definitely a topic, but it wasn't certainly as top of mind as it is today. And I feel like part of that is really a paradigm shift, because consumers back then, right, they resigned themselves that privacy was the price to pay, right, to access certain applications or functionality. And if you didn't really ascribe to how privacy was defined for you by third-party applications or platforms, I mean, you're essentially one of the cavemen, right? Or we call them, the savants who would end up building your custom Linux laptop and really opting yourself out of major services, right? So you wouldn't be able to use Google, Facebook, or even your iOS device at the end of the day. But now that these regulations are really here to stay, and companies like Apple, like Facebook, Google are taking the lead on defining privacy for your products, it's becoming the norm, right? And it's something that consumers need to consider for everything going forward. So as a product manager, right, start asking yourself, what information are you actually gathering? So this is where I move on to something that probably all of us have seen. I know my Netflix queue has grown by a ton, especially during the pandemic, right? And this one is super, I think, relevant because a lot of folks have seen it, and it really becomes part of a larger wake-up call for consumers. And people are coming around to the fact that privacy has very real ramifications in our lives. And because of all the data that's being tracked about each and every one of us, the online experience becomes very polarized towards you. In fact, that's what it's designed to be, right? When you open Facebook or you open up Google, right, the first hits or the ads are really about things that you care about, right? So for example, I love to sail. I play a lot of tennis, right? So usually the ads that I see are usually about sailboats, buying boats or sailing lessons, and buying tennis rackets, right? But you as a consumer, though, ultimately should have a choice. So if that data is being captured in a way that consumers can consume, or see more quality, targeted content that they actually care about without violating their privacy, then that's a good thing, right? But if those platforms are just capturing data to maximize your time on the platform, to increase engagement, then that has a more sinister motive, right? And ultimately, it's my philosophy that consumers should have the ability to dictate and not be pandered to. And what's more serious, right, is we hear about all of these hacks or attacks, cyber attacks right now on treasure troves of data, right? The Equifax tax or attack right now, unfortunately, is not isolated, right? It's repeated itself many, many times over. And that becomes serious because if a company gets hacked, then all of that data that they just captured on you gets into the hands of other people. And so there's a very real cost for all of us as consumers to avoid other companies from holding all of that data on you, right? And so turning to kind of the crux of my talk today, which is why is privacy so important to product managers? Right. And so for the PMs who are tuning in today, designing products for privacy, as I mentioned earlier, is not something that was typically part of the PM responsibilities, right? Usually it was handled by an adjacent team like AppSec or SecOps, and they provide sign-off, right, by reading your APIs, by examining your data flow. But because PMs are growing into a role where ultimately the success, things like on-time delivery of your product is really upon your shoulders, it becomes really imperative that PMs also deliver a successful product that is on time. And because privacy is now such an important element of the products that we deliver for really any products that touch customer data, you need to think about a couple of things as a product manager, right? And ultimately help your team avoid delays that prevent you from delivering a successful product that's on time. And in my personal opinion, of course, really understanding privacy as a product manager is a great way to accelerate your career as a PM. Being a subject matter expert in privacy actually allows you to become someone that other teams might come to for advice, may ask questions, or turn to if they're shipping anything that will remotely come close in customer data. Price actually consider or data from B2B or enterprise and build privacy into your product. So first off, when releasing your product, really understand the demographic that you're serving. So for example, if you're catering to customers in Europe, of course, that would be GDPR. If you're catering to customers on the West Coast, specifically in California, of course, then pay attention to CCPA. But ideally, actually, especially as we are increasingly building products for more global audiences, your organization should actually adopt a standard that doesn't segregate based on demographics, but something that's standard across the entire world, right? And it shouldn't matter if you're in the EU or not, if you want to incorporate GDPR into your product. Point is, you should not be storing any data that you don't need for your product. Next, right, make sure that as a company, when you launch your product, that you have a process in place for data subject requests, or for example, when customers reach out to you for the right to be forgotten. You know, one of the most important things is that as a product manager, you understand what data your product will require, where you're getting that data from, right? And most importantly, why is that your business is gathering that data? So Recipe for Disaster, right, is a product that collects every piece of data that is known about consumers while not really understanding how that data will be used, or simply the idea of, well, you know, we're going to use it later on for something, right? We don't know quite what it is right now, but it'll be useful down the road. You know, that's a recipe for disaster, because when it comes time for customers' requests like the right to be forgotten or characterizing to regulators or auditors how you're actually using their data, it's going to be really hard to assemble that information or that knowledge on the fly. So what it boils down to is, as product managers, try to understand what APIs you've built for your product and which ones you're currently using, where that data flows, and if applicable, how that data makes its way to data scientists for transformation, for analytics, right? And if you think about all these things, you'll be less likely to have a launch delay because of the way that you have not incorporated privacy into your product development, right? And so in my conversations with founders or with product managers, there's a few product design ideas that have come to mind that we brainstormed. Once you've identified the, let's say, data residency requirements, and that's certainly an element of privacy that's super important, right? Data residency, in a nutshell, is data result. You understand where your data residency requirements come from, and you're able to put guardrails and perimeters around your data to prevent violation of those data residency requirements. And if you're really interested in this topic, and maybe this talk, you know, started you thinking about how to build privacy into your products, there's some really cool startups out there that I highly recommend you check out. Right, one of them is called Gretelai, which is led by a few ex-Amazon executives, where they've really built a set of tools that can be deployed as a SaaS application, or you can deploy as a container API into your environment that helps customers, especially developers who need access to a certain data set to do analysis or to inform their development decisions, get privacy right. Right? So in a nutshell, it creates a synthetic data set or anonymized data set for development, testing, staging. And if you're working with other business units or partners, right, it also helps you really honor those to meet privacy regulations. So I know this was a very kind of high-level coverage of data privacy, but it's really important, right? And I want to stress the importance about how product managers can think about incorporating privacy elements or privacy fundamentals into their product development process. So it's never too early to start. And just to summarize, right, it's really important to really understand, you know, the user persona and the demographics that you're building for, so you can understand which of the data privacy regulations you need to architect your product for. Of course, happy to entertain any questions. And if you want to reach out, Nancy Z Wang is my Twitter handle. So Deepak, if you're still out there, I'd love to start taking audience questions.
Yes, I'm here, Nancy. Fascinating talk, data and privacy. What more can I say? When you talked about building a custom Linux laptop, you took me on a journey. So a very good use of evocative imagery. Right. Lots of questions for you. I'll do my best to get you all in. Very good questions, hard to choose. So the first one from Cameron says, have you seen products that turn privacy from a defensive position, we respect your privacy, to a positive differentiator? Use this product because we value your privacy.
Yeah, that's such a great question, right? In fact, I was speaking with the head of privacy for Google Ads a couple months back, right? He had just joined Google from Brave. So if you guys have used the Brave browser before, right, it's known for being one of the best browsers out there for privacy, making sure that it blocks ads, right, blocks cookies from gathering your personal information. And that's really the principle and the kind of thought leadership that he wants to bring into Google Ads, certainly, right? And that's why Google has been at the forefront of these conversations as a key aggregator of all of our search data, our search metadata, our preferences, which ads we happen to click or which sites we happen to click through more, right? All contributing to Google's ability to really build an individualized profile about each and every one of us, right, who use the service. I think by taking a stand now and saying, hey, you can actively opt out, right? I mean, there's so many applications out there that use your Google credentials to opt into their applications. Google provides you more customization, the ability to opt out of, let's say, that application seeing your Google Calendar, seeing your email, seeing your contacts, right? And it's becoming more of a thought partner into this consumer privacy dialogue than sort of the big bad wolf that's just gathering data. Right, so to answer that question, there's a lot of ways that companies who are seen as the main touch point for customer data can leverage that narrative and turn it around actually into their favor of becoming a thought partner with consumers who are now so much savvier around how their personal data is being used to then help protect themselves.
Yes, I am using this on a Brave browser now. So love Brave and love what they have to offer. Next question is from Olga. Olga is asking a question about an Amazon product. I've read an article about Amazon Nest creating a mesh network with nearby devices. Could you elaborate more on this logic and how this corresponds with CCPA and in the future with GDPR?
So I have to say, Olga, I'm not super familiar with that product, and some of it may change based on what that team thinks about their roadmap. But I'd be happy to take that question down and connect you with the product managers on that team.
Right. So Abhishek Chakraborty has the next question. Curious to learn more about how we make sure in advance what data we need and what we don't, because the common habit is to collect as much data as possible just to be safe. Who knows what they'll need in the future to serve?
Yeah, so this goes back into first principles, right? As a product manager, it's important to think, we're not building the products for ourselves, right? Unless it happens to be a very personalized product, right? Which point, I'll hold my peace, right? But I think most of us who are building products for other consumer profiles or those of us who are in the B2B product space, really come down to, what is the user persona, right? Or what is the demographic that you're building for? And in the case of building global products, so for example, one of the businesses I run at AWS is called AWS Backup, right? It is a global product. You'll find us in EU, you'll find us in APAC, you'll find us, of course, in the US. So how do we make sure then that we are compliant, right, with all of these different regulations? And it's really working back from those profiles. So because we know that we will most definitely, right, as a core service to AWS, have global customers, then essentially we just come up with a long list, right, or a list of all the regulations that we know, right, including, for example, NIST data standards and FedRAMP, because we also have government customers, right, and we make sure that all of our data is compliant with all of those regulations. I know it's a lot, right, but that down the road just prevents you from having those edge cases or corner cases, or even worse, right, not being able to serve a specific customer contingent because you didn't design your product for that earlier on.
True, very true. Yes, mapping out customer journeys makes sense. You can't map out for every eventuality, but at least for what you know, collecting data to facilitate that feature or that benefit totally makes sense. So yeah, you can't collect everything for tomorrow You have to collect relevant for now. Perfectly said. Christine Dree has another question. With new privacy considerations, how are business models affected, especially for models that try to be more accessible or free? How do companies and products adapt to this new normal?
Yeah, I think it comes down to really what we talked about, right, in the keynote, is customers or consumers becoming just more savvy about how their data is being collected and what their data is being used for, right? And in terms of business models, if you happen to be, let's say, delivering a product that monetizes off of customer data, right? And that can be, for example, a lot of products in marketing tech, like Marketo or maybe even HubSpot with automated campaigns. Those products really thrive off of collecting data, understanding data of who you're driving those campaigns for, right? That's where it's really important, right? Because if, for example, as a consumer, I know this particular company has very poor privacy standards or does not put a lot of thought into how that data is being used, gathered, collected, stored, right? Even as backups, right? Then it may make me less inclined to use their services. Or, for example, if I see a campaign coming from that company, right, I'll most likely mark it as spam. So that's why it becomes a opt into privacy by default now. And you see that as a trend actually among product teams. So for example, at Facebook, I know that there's a special team now that rolls up into the chief product officer of just building privacy products, right? Making sure that privacy as a first principle is embedded into every product that Facebook ships.
Excellent question. Thanks for that question, and fantastic response, Nancy. Very thorough. Next question from Stephen Chang. How do you prepare for a worst case scenario where there's a data leak that might cause a major disruption?
Well, being a little bit partial, backups, of course, that's important. There's, because there's, like I said, right, Equifax was really the first one. Now there's, there were SolarWinds, right, that happened last year. There's so many different ways that, for example, hackers either maliciously, right, can get a backdoor into your systems and that way leak data, or for example, it could be even non-malicious, right? Maybe an employee fat-fingered something, right, and caused that data to, let's say, not be encrypted and potentially being sent unencrypted into another server, which then gets exposed, right? There's so many different ways now that we have all of these systems online of these data leaks happening. But I think what's really important, right, going back to the data perimeter concept, is once you know where your data can and cannot go, right? And this is actually going back to the Gretelai conversation, right? Brilliant concept of making sure that as a developer, right? And if you want to access a certain data set, let's say you're, building something to do targeted recommendations, let's say for retail, right? And you want to be able to get data sets of customer purchases, retail trends, maybe over the last 5 years of various customer profiles. You need to be able to access that in a safe and secure manner, even as a developer, right? And after you've leveraged that data set, then how do you put it back and make sure that just because you've accessed it, no one else who shouldn't be able to access that data can. Right. And so that comes into, a lot of innovation actually that I'm seeing around data firewalls. So making sure that you can cut off access at the network layer. Also technologies like this one that I just mentioned, right? Deploying as a container APIs, for example, that, you can essentially build this perimeter around your data sets. But regardless of whatever method, right, developers and product managers end up choosing, it's really important to understand, what is your process for doing this? So in the case in the future, right, if you get requests around, data subject requests, or, hey, I want the right to be forgotten, right, you're not caught in a scramble, right? And that was actually one of some real customer fires that came up during my first stint in data protection, which is, this major customer in the EU, they had tons of their data backed up, but one specific consumer said, hey, I want you to delete all your entries on me. But how do you do that over 10 years? right, of the customer using this product? And how do you even search for that in, let's say, your file systems or, in your different tables, right? And it becomes this monumental task that you could totally circumvent if you had the right standards and controls in place.
No, I don't envy anybody doing this and firefighting this. This is a nightmare. Last couple of questions then for you, Nancy, today. This one is from Thomas. How do you manage privacy considerations when managing a product distributed worldwide? Do you take the strictest rules for the whole product, or do you adapt to the country depending on the circumstances?
Yeah, so I think there was a question earlier that was similar, right? Which is, what do you take the least common set, right? Or do you take the union, right, set of all these regulations? I tend to be more conservative, right? Given that I work in data protection, backups are the first line of defense in ransomware and cyber attacks, all of that, right? So I take the union of all sets. And I think that's in my opinion, while it may be more work upfront, right? You're taking on a big load upfront in your product development journey. However, in my opinion, right, it will save you from scrambling and even notifying customers, hey, you cannot use this because, let's say, we'll need a 3-month lead time on the fly to build in this privacy regulation into our product because we didn't design it with that in mind.
Excellent point. 2 more questions, Nancy, for you. Do you think there will come a time where a user will have total control on having some or none of their data stored or shared?
Given the way, right, and again, I'm not a future seeker, so this is just my personal prediction. Given the way that privacy regulations are trending and how customers are just becoming more savvy, right? So for example, I was in a discussion with one of the product leaders from Square's payment app, right? Where she was describing, hey, how customers before, right, they would just accept, hey, well, I got to use my credentials here to auth into this app, or giving up my personal information right into an online web form is what it takes for me to use this service. Well, people are actually putting their foot down and saying, no, I don't agree to that. You need to change how your product is built. I still want to use it, right? And that really changed the dialogue. So I think that given the tailwinds there, right, and the shift into that frame of mind and how customers are creating special teams to address this topic, I think absolutely yes, right? In our ability to provide more fine-grained controls, right? So previously, right, a control would simply apply to a certain resource that you might have had a tag, right? But that tagged resource may have had like thousands upon thousands of different entries at this point, right? And I'm looking at new technologies that can now create fine-grained controls around the specific entry, right, in a table. So I think the more we're able to improve on the tech innovation side, as well as this topic becoming top of mind for people, absolutely yes, right? In terms of when I think it will happen, likely before 2025.
Excellent. Last question possibly for you. Question from Elias. What keeps you up awake these days regarding your role? What is top of mind for you?
So I'll have two separate answers for that question. I know some of my team is tuning in this morning, so I would say, running my role, so my team right now, I've been very fortunate to lead, close to 70 people at Amazon, right? And they range across, product managers, engineers, designers, et cetera. It's really making sure that, we're delivering, right? We are, exciting leadership with what we're delivering. But at the same time, right, that each individual on the team gets a sense of fulfillment in the products they get to build, right, the cool technologies that they get to see. And we're very fortunate that as AWS backup, for example, we get to touch every other service on AWS. So every person on the team gets to learn a little bit about all the other services that customers use to build their enterprise applications, to run their businesses. I think in the industry, what keeps me up at night is, given the just explosion of data, right, is how companies can continue to centrally govern and make sure that your data really stays in compliance, right? And that's really on top of mind for me, and that has led to actually quite fascinating conversations. I wish we had the time, right, with CISOs, with CIOs around how they think about, for example, protecting their organization against cyber attacks, or, for example, as cyber attacks become more sophisticated, right, and they insert themselves actually into the, let's say, sometimes deployment pipeline, how do you detect for that? Right there, and how do you build or enhance your current tooling to make sure that your company, let's say, stays right the test of time?
Excellent. Well, Nancy, I think we're out of time, but yes, given time, we would have loved to chat more with you. Fascinating conversation, deep insights from an industry leader. Thank you, Nancy, for your time today. I certainly enjoyed moderating the conversation and looking at the questions. People loved what you had to say. Thank you again for your time today, Nancy.